In celebration of RDTE finally hitting the market, I'm doing a breakdown on both QDTE and XDTE. So today we're talking about XDTE and their full price history. We're going to talk about all the distributions they've made, the total returns that you would have based off those distributions, what the actual output has been. We're going to put it into a drip calculator to double check all of my findings and talk about the fund and how it has performed, which is super, super exciting. If you haven't seen the QDT video, I'll link that one at the end of this one if you want to check that one out. Some very interesting stuff over there. But let's talk about RDTE real quick. So with RDTE, it's a lot of the same stuff that we've seen with the other funds, but I'm really excited because it's on the Russell 2000 index, which is different for a number of reasons. I'm not going to go into all the details until the fund is trading and we've seen a lot of the distributions come out, and I'll put some videos out. Assets under management, 8.1 million, which is even bigger than it was yesterday. I think it was under $1 million yesterday. So they're jumping up, they're purchasing more stuff, more money's flooding into the fund. But what I want to talk about is the distribution calendar, because we haven't seen dividends yet. But starting, the first declaration will be September 25. So we still got about 2 weeks. And then your first pay date will be the 27th, 2 days following. And after that, it's every single week for this fund, which I am so excited about. I love weekly dividends, and I love having 3 different funds that can provide them now. I do own all of these. I already have purchased RDTE just because I wanted to. I have faith in the Roundhill company so far. I don't have an insane amount of money in it. It's a very small portion of my portfolio in Roundhill funds specifically, but it is cool. And if they do perform well, then I will continue to buy them and continue to make videos on them, especially if you guys like them. Which, speaking of, if you like this type of content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. It helps build the channel. It helps me out a bunch, and I appreciate it because you guys can provide insight that I wouldn't necessarily find myself. So I always appreciate that. Let's jump right into XDTE and the total return we've seen from this ETF. Starting off, we're looking at XDTE on the BATS, which, for those of you that don't know, because I didn't when I first initially looked into these funds, the BATS is a different kind. It's similar to the New York Stock Exchange. It's a rather large platform, I guess you would say, which I think is really important to know. I was really like, oh, what's the BATS? I've never even heard of that. But it pretty much, from my research, it checks out. I don't know too much about it, but I did enough research to be like, okay, I'm comfortable with it. So that's why it's a different exchange is the word that I'm looking for than the really common ones. But they said it's really competitive with the NYSE. So I'm happy. That's enough for me. You should always research that stuff yourself. Let me know what you guys think about it. Now, when it comes to the price appreciation of XDTE, we can see it's down 1.58% since it first started trading, and that was March 7 of 2024. Now, because it is a newer fund, I am really, really anxious to be checking out exactly what goes on behind the scenes with this fund. Are we going to see a bunch of NAV erosion like we have seen with some of the yield max funds? Because I am not into that whatsoever. Some of the yield max funds have performed really well, but for me, I want safety with my investments. I don't like being stressed depending on the news, depending on the stock market. I want consistent dividends. And so if this one can pay weekly consistent dividends, then that is a win in my book. Now, we are down, like I said, though, near 1.6% compared to QDTE. We're already off to a better start. That one was down over 10%. And so why I'm showing you this and why we're talking about it is because this stuff matters. Now, I know people say, oh, well, if the yield is 30%, does 2% down really matter? It does matter, and we need to factor that in, because sometimes when you think you're getting a 30% yield, you're only getting a 10% yield, and then if you're also down 5%, that's really going to counteract your returns in the stock market. So I wanted to show that really quickly, and now let's jump into the full distribution history, and we'll check out exactly what the fund is all about. If you've watched any of my XDTE videos, you've seen all this, so I'm not going to go too far into detail. We can see the distribution rate is just under 26%. If we open this fact sheet here, which I recommend you guys do, some of this is old. The assets under management is more than it's saying on here now, but the expense ratio is the same, nearly 1%, and that reasoning is because they're writing calls every day. So it is difficult to maintain these, but that's the same as the yield max funds, and those ones only pay monthly. So I do think that it's a decent expense ratio for what you're getting. Now, not going too far into detail, we all know how these funds work, and the reason the 0 DTE, or 0 days till expiration, is so groundbreaking is because it allows you to trade or accrue price appreciation in the aftermarket hours. So this one trades on the S&P 500. If in the after hours the S&P is up 0.5%, then they write calls on all of the amount that they have, but you're still gaining that pre-market and aftermarket appreciation. Now, if you think that we're in a bear market or we're going to go into a bear market soon, then that will be doubly worse, because if you think the fund is going to drop in the long term, then you will be dropping because of the aftermarket and pre-market trading, but you'll still be accruing the dividend. So it really comes down to your investment strategy. Now, again, there's so much stuff on the Roundhill funds. You should check them all out yourself. Check out their website. They have a ton of other funds besides these ones that pay monthly, which I will be talking about on the channel in the near future. But today is about XDTE, QDTE, RDTE, and the weekly distributions. The dividend history or distribution history that we've seen from this ETF has been pretty phenomenal. They have 25 distributions so far, with the last one paying just 2 days ago at 33 cents. It has bounced around quite a bit, all the way from a low of 2 cents to the high of 41 cents, which is an insane disparity between these two distributions. And that's kind of what we're expecting. These funds are going to optimize on the daily volatility in the market, and so more volatility equals higher premiums. Higher premiums mean more risk, but more potential gain. So you have to think of all of that when you're seeing the distribution and why it's changing all the time. This also means that just because it is at near 40 cents every single week right now, it may not remain that way. It may go back down to 15 or lower even. So think about that and understand if you're going to try and live off of this dividend or these distributions from these funds, it's going to be sporadic and it's going to be tough. But you could make it happen. You can just have some really easy months and some really difficult months. That is completely up to you. So we can see here, yes, it pays weekly. The important thing that I want to talk about, like I've said, with the price appreciation overall, is they have paid out $6.21. Now, the price for this fund has been a lot more consistent than QDTE, ranging from a high of $53.50 to just under $50.50, I think, $50.50, or maybe a little bit more than that. So in order to make this accurate, I'm going to take the $6.21 and we're going to divide that by the average price. I should say median price because I'm kind of ranging it right in the middle. The average price would take a lot of work to get. You would have to take the price of the stock every single day and divide it by the total number of days that you measured. And so that's just too much. And I can tell by looking at it, it's going to be roughly $52. So I'm going to divide this by $52. And then we're going to multiply that by 100 to get our return, which so far is an 11.94% return. Now, we also need to remember that this 11.94%, we have to subtract that 1.58% to get our return. So it's looking like a 10.36% return, and this is what we've seen so far. Now, it gets a little bit hairy because we have not seen a full year of trading, and that's why this might be a little bit lower. But the way that this works, I'm going to throw up we're going to throw up this page. This distribution rate that they have on here is based solely on the last price of the fund and the last distribution. So they are kind of, even though the distributions have been going up, which is a great sign, you're not getting the full picture by this rate. This fund is not yielding 26% a year. The last distribution was a 26.93% return, which is different. That's the percent you would be getting. And so they're basing it all off just one distribution. I hope that's not too confusing. I'm almost confusing myself a little bit with that. But this is still a 10% return that we've seen so far. And so at the end of the year, I'm really curious to see how this turns out. But for now, let's do a drip calculation and see how far off I am from my $10.36 or 10% return. I'm on dividendchannel.com's drip calculator. So we have XDTE, and we're going to throw this in for 10K invested. Oh, 10.32%. So my 10.36% is 0.04% off, which I think is pretty decent. That could be any number of rounding errors that I've done. I would probably trust this more than my just calculation that I did for you guys, but I like to show how I do these calculations when I do them. Now, that being said, you're looking at a total return of 10% and an annualized return of 20% based off of what we've seen so far. So significantly better than QDTE. I will say that. Go check out that video. I don't know if you'd be surprised by the results, but people have been saying that XDTE is the better option, and I would definitely agree just based off the results I've seen from these two videos. Now, we can see that with dividends reinvested, you will get a better return of about 1.2% better. So not a huge disparity, but the longer you hold it, the more of a difference that will be. So that is something to think about if you're holding this for just income or if you want it to grow, which I don't know if these would even be considered growth ETFs. Let me know what you guys think about these because they do pay weekly, which is great, but most people would use that for income. But if you're able to grow that and continually get a 20% return, I would drip all day long and just throw as much money into it as I can. So I hope you guys have enjoyed You can use all these things yourself. It's all free access. Seeking Alpha I use the free version. Drip Calculator is free. All this stuff is totally free. And I'm curious to see what you guys think of the results I've gotten so far. Let me know down in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I hope to see you in the next video.